So, who am I and why am I standing in front of you? I'll give you a little bit of a background to give you some context. So I'm not an Agile-focused consultant, but I have done work for an Agile company before, so Agile consulting firms. And that's how I met Hammer. And my focus is on strategy development, strategy clarification for senior teams, helping senior teams execute their strategies and organizations. The distinction I always make is setting a strategy and setting a path to execution does not necessarily mean you execute it well. There's a big gap between the plan and the realization of the objectives of that plan. And that's usually the gap that I come in and help organizations with. And it's everything from interpersonal challenges that the executives are having together, most of which is this group thinks that's the way to go, and this group thinks that's the way to go. When they get in a meeting, they say nice things together, and when we get out of the meeting, they execute down different paths, and then no one can figure out why things aren't working well. And so I come in and try to interrupt that dynamic and get teams aligned and get them to execute a bit more effectively. And so one of the things I work on quite a bit is the culture of the organization. Because a lot of times those gaps exist, not just because there are 2 or 3 people in those meetings that are having trouble getting aligned, but because culturally that sort of alignment may not be expected in an organization. There may be a culture of divisiveness in an organization. So we tend to get into deeper cultural issues as well in having those conversations. So when I think about what I do, I think of a Venn diagram. So I won't use too much consulting-y stuff, but just to give you a bit of a picture, you think of the strategy of an organization. You think of the organization that needs to execute that strategy, and then the leadership, and the effectiveness of the leadership. And I'm always working in the center there. How can we get the leaders to be more effective, but not in a vacuum? How can we get them to be more effective in the designing and development and the execution and getting the organization to execute the strategy? So I'm always having conversations at that nexus. When I work with an individual leader or a group, I don't like to jump right into a process conversation because, number one, the process conversations are pretty old for the most part. I mean, you're not going to walk in an organization, why have a project management methodology? And they go, wow, we've never thought about that before. It's never usually what I find a process problem. By the time I'm brought in, they've tried a lot of processes. It's a larger cultural issue that's going on. So what I thought to start to talk about today is some of the mindsets that underlie strong stakeholder alignment. What are those things? That people that tend to do it well tend to think that way. So the first one is strong stakeholder alignment takes time and can be a pain in the ass. People think this. That's what everyone that has really strong stakeholder alignment realizes it's a pain in the ass because it takes a lot more time and energy than if you just started executing down the path that you got green-lighted on. But the alternative is much more painful. When something becomes clear to me, there's a good chance it's still not clear to others. Or me being my team, and it's better to communicate something one too many times than one too few. So one of the things I talk a lot about is communication blind spot, which is after I've ruminated on something for a long time, I tend to get to a place where I see all the interconnections, and all of a sudden it's crystal clear to me. And 3 weeks later, I can forget about a lot of those interconnections that got me to this point, and then fail to communicate how I arrived at that point. And by going back and systematically uncovering the thought process that brought me to this point, figuring out how to clearly communicate that, I put myself in a much better position to align senior executives to me, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Another mindset, unless I have structured, scheduled processes for staying on the same page as stakeholders, it won't happen. Communication will break down, always does. So Agile is pretty good about that, and putting those processes in place. And one of the things I always say is that communication is always just about to break down. Always, constantly. Expect communication to break down. Think that it's going to break down. And that's the mindset to always carry. And think, as in the last bullet, that if I haven't communicated in a while, I'm pretty sure people are not on the same page as me. As a mindset to carry. If I see a potential problem or tough conversation brewing, I need to nip it in the bud quickly. It will create big problems later. So sweeping things under the rug, I don't know why people continue to think it's a good idea. I don't know why people think that you sweep them under there and the dust bunnies go away. They never go away. They grow. They get worse constantly. The mindset that people that are good at aligning stakeholders always have is, let's get it now. And the last one, I must make messages simple and an easy to follow narrative. The more complex my messages are, the less likely they are to land. People are too busy to parse complicated messages. And this is, I think, a really important one because we can oftentimes assume that our audience is pretty smart. So why do I have to really get this narrative that clear and simple? Well, because they got a complex message from someone 20 minutes ago and a different one 20 minutes before that, and people just can't parse all those messages. And they don't understand. So what I often talk about is we'll talk about this a little bit later. In any message, you're moving from the data to the takeaways, to the implications of that, to what are the recommended next steps. And a lot of times, people want to just communicate a lot of data. And what senior exec often doesn't have time to do is understand what are the key takeaways and the implications of all this data you're sharing. I just can't parse it all, I can't digest it all. So that's another mindset. So those are 5 key mindsets that I always think about when I'm working with a group that's doing something complex, challenging, executing something different.